Ahlan, ahlan, ahlan. Welcome, guys, to this new episode of Listen Habibi. I'm here today with, as promised, a new episode called Meet Ian, and it's going to be on season 4 Boston University, and this is episode 4. So I'm super excited to bring to you one of my new friends here on campus to sort of talk about himself and talk about his experiences in life this far and, his plans for the future. So sit back, relax, enjoy the episode, and we're going to get started right now. حبيبي يا عيني يا عيني يا ليلي يا مسهر عيني. Hey Ian, how are you today?
I'm good. A little cold, but that's part of living in Boston.
Yeah, I know it. The weather is starting to get a little chilly. I feel like we're in that phase where it's like we're fall, winter.
It is, but I definitely prefer this transition from fall to winter than winter to spring, question mark, and then summer.
Really?
Yes.
Really? Why is that?
I mean, I grew up thinking that spring was this nice, sunny, not too cold, not too warm weather. Here in Boston, that's not the case. But fall to winter, it's much more, it's pretty.
Yeah.
It's very pretty.
Yeah, you're right.
And
Especially
so
like
far,
here with like the leaves
yes,
changing.
so I'm looking at towards the Esplanade and towards the Charles River.
Yeah.
And it is very, very pretty.
Yeah, so if you guys can't tell already, me and Ian are obviously classmates. We both go to BU. I actually met Ian because he's in my international relations class, and it's a doozy that class. But we I guess really got to know each other by studying for the midterm together. Prior to that, like I'd seen you around, but
yeah, we'd seen each other probably like out of class 1-2 times, and then other discussions. But yeah, the midterm was that factor that drew us together.
Yeah. So basically, I'd like for you to just introduce yourself. So tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and then we're gonna hop into sort of the root of what we're trying to bring up here.
Yes, of course. So you already mentioned it. My name's Ian. I'm from Puerto Rico, born and raised. Moved from Puerto Rico to Boston for my freshman year. I'm studying international relations, of course, as that's how we know each other. I aspire to be a future officer in the Marine Corps. I'd love to do aviation. And yeah, I guess we'll just dive into that later on, but that's just a short spiel about me.
So you're in ROTC.
Correct.
So you're in like a special program here on campus that simultaneously treats you as a student, like a regular BU student, in addition to, specializing in a major and going down a path in the military. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it's like to be in such a program and how that's incorporated into your life as a student?
Yes, of course. So the ROTC program is actually a great program. I'm very, very happy to be a part of it. So this program essentially, the ROTC means the Reserve Officer Training Corps, right? So what you do is, at least for the Navy, I can't really speak heavily on the Air Force and Army, but the Navy, essentially you go to school, right? Mm-hmm. If you're lucky, they'll pay for your tuition. And throughout the 4 years that you're here in college, you'll get your undergraduate's degree. But at the same time, through some classes, some leadership labs, perhaps for us Marine options, some field exercises, you'll get a feel for what is going to be expected of you as an officer 4 years down the road.
Wow.
How are you going to treat, how are you going to talk to your subordinates, essentially, and what role you play in such a big and important organization as the United States Department of Defense, right? Mm. So there's a big focus on leadership and service. So it's not only leadership about you wearing those butter bars, as they call it, second lieutenant bars. It's more about what you as an individual can bring to the table and add to an organization where you're not really the center of the organization. Yes, frankly, you might be earning more than most of your subordinates. You might have the shiny stuff on your collar, but it's about putting that aside and just being able to lead your men and women when time needs.
Wow, that's beautiful. So what is this training that you talk about consist of? What does it look like for you on a typical day?
All right, so training, I think there's a big misconception that all we do in ROTC is like war related and military related, stuff like that. And there's stuff as simple as time management courses and classes to very big and very broad field exercises. And even on throughout your throughout your summers, you'll go on summer cruise. At least for, like I was saying, I don't know about the Air Force and Army, but the Navy, you'll be sent to a variety of places, and it's just an educational experience, and you'll get to implement what you've learned throughout the year.
Wow.
So a typical day, like you said, I'm a student 98% of the time. Sometimes it feels like I'm a student 5% of the time, and ROTC 95% of the time. But really, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays is when we have our PT and our leadership labs. So PT is our physical training. Tuesdays that goes from 06 to 07. You got to be there 15 minutes early, so that means that I got to wake up at 5. So
Oh
my day
my
on Tuesday and
God.
Thursday start at 5.
5 in the morning.
To be there and ready to go at 5:45, we'll get accountability of everybody. We'll do whatever workout we have to do that day. We have somebody in charge of preparing those workouts and everything. Like I said, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Wednesdays are leadership labs. So leadership labs are a little later. It goes from 06:30 to 08:30. But due to the fact that you have to wear your uniform, our khaki uniform, then I still have to wake up around 5-ish to,
Jeez.
shave. You're supposed to shave every day.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I don't grow that much hair. So, but I do have to shave on Wednesdays in case we do have inspection. I'll get ready, I'll go to class, and then leadership labs. Like I said, there's so many things that we'll go over. We'll have regional talks about what's going on in this part of the world or this part of the world.
Wow.
We'll have guest speakers. The other day we had the commander of Naval Science Training Command come down and talk to us for a while. We'll have alumni come down and talk to us. There's a very, very wide variety of people that come. And thankfully, the organization here, the ROTC Battalion, is known for its good scores, its good aptitude scores. We do have a lot of smart people here.
Well.
We got kids from MIT and Harvard.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the caliber of midshipmen that take a part of our program.
I mean, you're smart too. Give yourself credit.
I'm talking about the people at MIT and Harvard. Those kids are insane.
Well, for sure. They're across the river, though.
Yes, they're across the river. But there are a lot of... I mean, I can't think of a single midshipman that I can be like, wow, I don't know how you got here.
Wow.
The caliber of
That's
the people
impressive.
that I'm surrounded with in that organization is insane.
So to that point, you're kind of split between these two worlds, right? Where you're like, you're held to such a high regard. There's this pressure to be disciplined, to be, like you said, this caliber is really high. On the other hand, you're just a student. You're, going through the motions just like all of us are, growing up, being independent, studying, all of these challenges that maybe, whether it be with your identity or your future plans or whatever it may be, how do you feel like you balance the two? Because I feel like there's almost like a lack of discipline in one world, and then the other world, it's like there's nothing but discipline, and I find that extremely impressive. But tell me.
I'm actually glad that the last sentence you said is going to be my very straight to the point answer.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to do one without the other.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I grew up in a military environment. My dad is a retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel. My mom works for the federal government, and I went to school inside a military base my whole life. The discipline that I've gotten from my dad, which by no means is he never treated me like I was a soldier or anything. Don't get me wrong, but there was a very strict sense of responsibility and discipline, respect.
Yeah.
And like I said, I went to school inside a military environment. And sometimes I'll walk around campus and I'll see certain people doing certain things, certain people taking certain actions. And I'll think to myself, am I holding them to a higher standard or not? And then most of the time I'll come to the conclusion that the military doesn't really hold you to that much of a higher standard than what society or what our foundations really intended us to hold ourselves to.
So you think we're slipping?
I mean, who's out there holding us accountable?
Not
many people. But in the military, at least in my personal experience with the Marines, even since I've been a freshman, whatever decision or lack of responsibility, lack of discipline on my part could cost the life of somebody else.
Right.
Not only one life, but God knows how many lives. It can be as simple as working out. If you don't work out, if you're not in shape, if you can't even pass your PT test, if you can't carry one of your buddies, how is that going to affect the platoon when you're in combat? But it also goes down to knowing your professional knowledge stuff. If you can't learn basic history, how am I supposed to learn how to call for fire? How am I supposed to, I want to do aviation. If I can't learn basic dates and basic names, how am I going to be
How are you
able
gonna
to fly a
fly?
multi-million-dollar plane?
Yeah. Wow.
So
It's a different pressure.
it is a different pressure. Yes, that is for sure.
I feel like everything you're describing is like, you know what you want. It's clear. Like, you know where you're destined to be, and there's still room to grow. You know, it's not like
Yes,
this
of course.
end game, but you have like almost like a passion or a duty within yourself, and you can like see the end. I don't know if you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, you know?
So it's interesting that you bring that up because many people say that, but I like to say that I planned my life 4 years ahead.
4 years.
So when I got to high school, I knew what I wanted to do after high school.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I wanted to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I wanted to be an officer in the United States military. At first, it was Air Force, but ended up being the Marines, thank God. And now when I was nearing that date that I had to go to college, I had already planned for 4 years. So I had 4 years to plan. I'm here in college, right? And I know where I want to be 4 years from now. I know what I want to do after I graduate. I know how I want to be living. I know what I want to be doing. I know what I'll have. So for the next 4 years, I'll be preparing for that mark. Now, when I graduate, I'll start preparing for 4 years ahead and stuff like that. People say you can't really plan your life. You can't. It's impossible to. But you can arm yourself with different types of tools.
You're right.
To help yourself succeed.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Not because you want to be better than anybody, but it's never hurt to be more prepared than the people around you.
Absolutely.
It just makes you more successful.
It's very wise. Very well
and
said.
And not only are you more successful, but like you said, I used to deny it, but I guess I do have the sense of duty to the people around me, to the people around me in any given situation. I think it's important that there's always one person that is able to lead people. I love leading.
Leadership.
So when you have a positive impact in the lives of other people, that's pretty meaningful to me.
It's funny you say that because I feel like leadership is such a huge portion of my life too, and like my identity, the way that I navigate my day-to-day. And I feel like when I'm here, like you get so caught up in the group mentality. You get so caught up in like, oh, you're just a number. We have like upwards of 30,000 students between grad and undergrad here, and we're, in the city, you're literally a number. But leadership is like, it's seriously something that motivates me to keep pushing, to, get to my end goal that you talk about as well. And it's really just like, I think it's a natural born quality too. I think you can make a leader, but I also feel like leaders are made from when they're young.
Yes, I agree with that. There's many, you'll read a lot that say leaders aren't born. I definitely think that there are certain traits that are innate. You're born with them. But to add to that, I think my upbringing was very important to.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about like what it was like being in Puerto Rico and how you feel like you have this duty to the American nationality, but you're also Puerto Rican, and like those relations, and then your parents being in the military for the U.S. Like,
so growing up in Puerto Rico is a fun time.
Yeah,
let's start off.
I'm sure.
It is a very fun time. Countless days spent at the beach.
Yeah,
it's very nice weather all year long. So yeah, it's a good time. Growing up in Puerto Rico, I would argue it's the same as growing up in Florida, growing up in Texas, California, Chicago, you name the city. We're very modernized. We're basically an extension of the United States. We use the American dollar. You don't need a passport to go in. We're American citizens.
Right.
So it's just an extension of the United States. We're a territory. There's a heavy there's a heavy American presence there.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it's an extension of the United States. So my when I grew up, it was a little bit different than most people. Well, kind of very different from most people. Like I said, I went to school instead of military installation,
Right.
the only big military installation in Puerto Rico. And it's not even that big. I mean, if you go to some installations here, they're huge. But you asked where this sense of duty to the Americans come. Um, the U.S. has done a lot for us. There's many people that argue otherwise. The American history, the United States history, and Puerto Rican history is very, very complicated.
Mm.
It is an issue that even to this day I'm learning about. There's some domestic issues going on right now about fiscal policy, debt, and with the University of Puerto Rico, and it's pushed me to further read on matters. It's a very complicated history. At times, it's a
Yeah,
very sad history
of course.
where one side gains more than the other.
Mm-hmm.
But we've gained a lot from the United States. Thankfully, my family, at least, most of them served in the military. At least from my mom's side, her uncles, most of them served in the military, all the way from World War II to Vietnam. So there's always been this sense of duty within my family, just because of what I said. I mean, Puerto Rico used to be very poor, and when the wars broke out, it was still a segregated army back then and stuff like that, but we still had the chance of helping our nation. I mean,
Yeah.
we're a part of the United States.
Right.
We're Puerto Rican, but we're part of the United States. It's like people from Texas. I know a couple people from Texas that they'll be like, I'm from Texas, but I'm also American, but I'm Texan.
Right. Right. But there's still that like blanket.
There's still that blanket that I serve a bigger purpose.
Yeah.
And like you said, more closely related to myself, my dad, he did 30 years in the Air Force.
Wow.
So that is a lot of time.
That's a lot of
devoted to one organization, nevertheless the military. My mom works for the federal government. I very much believe in the American, we call it the American dream in Puerto Rico. Back in the, I don't want to give an exact date because I'll probably be lying. I want to argue perhaps between the 50s and 70s. A lot of people left Puerto Rico to New York, Chicago, chasing that American dream, where if you worked hard enough, you would be able to live.
To make it.
You would be able to make it. So that was the American dream. And that's not only for Puerto Ricans, but I'm pretty sure you could relate to that
Absolutely,
as well.
Yeah, it applies to my
And that
family.
American dream was very much true then, and I believe it's very much true now.
I agree.
If you work your ass off, you will be able to make it, right? But you actually have to work your ass off.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's a little blurred now, the definition of working your ass off, but my mom and dad did it, right? And they did it in defense of a nation who does it in defense of an ideal, which I love, that idea of which the United States was founded on. Freedom, democracy. Like I said, United States history is very complicated. The way we expanded is very complicated. Our presence around the world is disputed and very complicated to this day, and it will always be. But I am a very strong supporter
of the foundation, the morality,
how history could be very, very different, and how we couldn't even be having this conversation had things turned out differently. Many decades ago.
Yeah.
So being a part of this organization is very fulfilling.
It's an honor. I think it's. I mean, you haven't even really joined, and I'm like proud of you.
Yeah, I'm not even. I don't even have my foot in. I have my foot in, but that's it.
I feel like somewhere along the way that how am I going to say? I feel like it's almost like frowned upon to be proud of being American sometimes. And I get asked this a lot because I'm extremely proud to be Lebanese, and I talk about it all the time. Like it's basically the backbone for my own motivation, my own drive. Just sort of like my roots and my ethnicity and my parents and the hustle and the sacrifice, like all of it. It just like, it makes me who I am. And oftentimes I get asked like, why are you so proud to be Lebanese? Like the country is literally like disintegrating at this
Yeah.
point. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it in the news. I've seen Puerto Rico in the news. Like, there's always something coming out. But I continually get asked, like, why are you so proud? Why are you so proud? And we actually talked about this last time.
Yeah.
But over the summer, I did a report on Lebanon, and I had to say a speech. It was for my rhetoric class, and we talked about just like speech delivery, whatever. So I got up there and I had written a speech about Lebanon. Easy guess. And just sort of like nationality and that like combating, you know, am I American, am I Lebanese, like why do I not feel whole in either of them? And my professor pointed this out to me. I already said this to you, but and it was shocking because before I'd never realized it, never recognized it. It didn't really like, you know, click with me. And he said, Addie, you know what's funny is like all these people in the streets that you're showing are, you know, demonstrating because we had to do a presentation. He's like, they're all carrying the Lebanese flag on their back. He's like, can you explain that a little bit? I was like, what does he mean? Like, he's like, aren't they protesting against the government? Like, isn't it their government that's kind of screwing them over? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, it's interesting that they still carry their flag that represents their country, their government. And it dawned on me at that moment that, like, no matter what, being Lebanese is that blanket that we just talked about. Being that ethnicity is what ties us together. Forget the ethnicity blood-wise, but just like that identity of, you know, like I have loyalty to my nation, and my nation is comprised of my people before it is comprised of the leaders that sit in the seats at the top. And I realized that it's not the same here. I feel like there's almost like a shame in saying like I'm proud to be American, despite, you know, our efforts of like being arguably the top country in the world, despite our efforts of ensuring freedoms, ensuring rights, protection, justice, all of the above. And this is, again, not to say that we're a perfect nation, because we're not a perfect nation. And I said this to you last time. Sometimes I struggle with putting like the US on Lebanese, like on the Lebanese scale or on Lebanon scale, when we should be putting like, you know, the US on the US scale, level, right? You know, holding up against itself. We have a lot of work to do. That's not a question.
It's interesting because once we talked about that the other day, I went back to my room. I had the Puerto Rican flag there, and I was like, "Holy smokes! Like, I've never thought about this."
Yeah.
But then here in the United States, I don't know if it's the fact that it's such a big country.
Yeah, that plays in.
But I went the other day to. I went out of the city to, I can't remember where, I don't remember the name, but essentially it was this, in the outskirts of the city, in this little town, every house that I went by had an American flag in front of it.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's always been traditionally like military, that area. One of the parks is like the Medal of Honor Park and everything. But there's a very big patriotic feeling in that part.
Right.
But you drive around Boston, you won't find that.
No.
Now, if you go around the United States, there will be parts that have the flags draped everywhere. Now, you'll go to other parts, probably like a 15-minute drive, and you won't even see a single American flag.
It's almost like a shame.
I want to say that's not always been the case. None of us have lived, either you or me have lived in the U.S. long enough, but I think that prior to the 2000s, even before, there was a very strong sense of patriotism. For X, Y reason, which we both know are very complicated, that's been waning. So now we're not American. Now we're supposedly Americans, but in reality we're X side before being American. We forget. There's a lot of people.
Break out into our groups.
Yeah, we break out into these groups and we forget.
Yeah.
That we're American.
First.
We forget what we've fought for. We forget the privileges we have, and we focus on these divisions, and we forget about the privileges that I'd argue more than 3/4 of Americans do not understand the amount of privileges they have just because of an American passport. Exactly.
Yeah.
You have an American passport. Something happens to you in the middle of nowhere, and you're safe. You can go to the American embassy there, and you'll be safe. You'll be safeguarded by Marines. That's not the case if you're from another country.
It's funny you say this. That word privilege, it's like blessings, it's
It's
opportunity,
more
it's
the word privilege here is, it's like you said, it's much deeper than it's. We need to make up another word for it because privileges just
I feel
doesn't
like it
even.
has a negative connotation
Yep.
now, like
Yep.
privilege. Oh, you're like you have.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's something that, and you know, like I've traveled. I'm not gonna say I'm the most well traveled person I
Mm-hmm.
know. Like I hope and dream to travel more, but with every country that I go to, and I learn new things. I learn about new culture, new people, new outlook, all this great like amazing, like a blessing, truly, truly a blessing. I come back and I'm like, I'm ready to kiss the ground that I walk on here. I swear.
Yep.
And that's me leaving the country with this international perspective, with family that lives abroad, with connections that I've made, with opportunities, with, and that's how I feel about this country. I still come back. I still feel like, you know, my heart is tied to like, wow, you know, here I have the room to grow. And it's funny because the Lebanese are proud everywhere they are.
Mm-hmm.
We have more Lebanese outside of Lebanon than within.
Yeah, same with Puerto Rico.
Same with Puerto Rico. And the diaspora is like proud. Like there's a very small population, I would say, is shamed of like the damage that the government has done to
Mm-hmm.
them. But the rest of us, like, it's this aching pain and pride, and it's beautiful, but it's like hopeless at the same time that like they're Lebanese first,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're, you know what I mean?
I
Do you
think.
feel like it's the same thing with Puerto
Oh
Ricans?
no, for sure. I think the diaspora, anywhere you go, is the same. But one very little detail that I've noticed, you go around Boston and you'll tell who's Puerto Rican.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
see a car going by, if the music doesn't give it away, you look into their car and you'll see a little
Little
Puerto
flag.
Rican flag hanging from the mirror, right?
Yeah.
And I went to the whole other side of the nation. I went to California over the summer, and I was on a military installation. I kid you not, I saw at least like 5 cars with the Puerto Rican flag, right? So that's in California inside a military installation, right? So it's a microcosm of society.
Yeah.
But if you go to Puerto Rico, you won't really see the flag hanging on cars.
Hmm.
But like you just said, the diaspora is, I'd argue, prouder. Like they can't even be they. There's no room to be prouder of being Puerto Rican because of the things you just mentioned. Once you leave the island, the economic situation in Puerto Rico has never been good,
Yeah.
and now it's even worse.
Of course.
When you live in the United States and you enjoy this lifestyle, you think of what Puerto Rico could be. You think,
Mm-hmm.
you're like, here I had the chance
Imagine.
to work, and I'm living the way I'm living because of my actions.
Right.
Back home, that's not necessarily the case. Back home, there's countless of people that have degrees, that have masters, and they're working at McDonald's because they can't find jobs. There's
Yeah.
just no room for growth. And when you come here, families that have children, children with disabilities, they come here and they're like, I had the chance to make it here, but I'm still Puerto Rican. I'm still, my heart aches for the island.
Mm.
Ever since we experienced Hurricane Maria, I saw that explode.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
after the hurricane, so we didn't really know how bad things were on the island. You knew things were bad because of what you saw,
Right.
but you didn't have the chance to turn on the TV. First, there was no power, there was no internet, there was no service, there was nothing. You couldn't even go on a 5 mile walk because you just couldn't. There was obstacles on the road. But I actually left the island about 3 weeks after the hurricane, and when I went to Florida to my grandparents' house, I quickly started looking at the news. I was like, oh, the whole island is gone.
Yeah.
The whole island was devastated.
Wow.
But I also started seeing famous artists, people, and just normal Puerto Ricans giving everything they could to be flown to the island. Money, supplies, blankets, toys, anything that they could get to help their people back home.
So beautiful.
It was absolutely amazing. And there's this picture, I think it was Ricky Martin, who was one of the first ones to land a plane in Puerto Rico before the government. I think he rented a small private jet. He filled it with supplies, and it was one of the first airplanes to reach Puerto Rico. And the picture of when that plane landed and the people receiving it, like the people got off the plane and the people receiving it, their faces were just
Priceless.
priceless. It was the first one of the first helps we got, and it was just amazing, the power that diaspora has in situations like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an amazing point.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful. What's it like being Puerto Rican in here right now?
It's actually cool.
Yeah.
That's how I describe it. So
it's a diverse campus here.
It is a very diverse campus. There's not many people that know that Puerto Rico is part of the U.S. So I'll get.
Wait, are you serious?
Oh yeah, I'll get asked.
People literally don't know it's a territory.
No, you'd be surprised about how. I kid you not. If I mention I'm Puerto Rican, there will be somebody that says, "Oh, but are you American?" And I've learned to just take a deep breath and be like,
"Wow,
oh, yes, all Puerto Ricans are American citizens." I just don't even bother getting mad about it anymore. That just speaks to a whole nother issue, which we're not talking about right now. We could dive into it later, but it's great. I mean, our culture is just
immaculate. I love it. I love it. The music, the dancing.
So, for example, today, like I told you, I had a bike somewhere. It's a rainy day. It was kind of cold, so I get back, and I'm going to eat lunch. And I'm a little wet, and I'm nearing the dining hall, and I start hearing a song by one of our artists. And I can't describe, just hearing a song.
It relieves you, doesn't it?
Knowing that you're in Boston. It can't kind of get more American than a city like Boston. And you walk into this dining hall at BU, and you're listening to one of your artists on the radio, on the speakers, and that happens so often. I mean, yeah. I'll be going down Com Ave, and suddenly this car comes blasting because we can't listen to music like normal people. We'll blast the music, and it's just it cheers you up. So
yeah,
that's amazing. I mean, our food is amazing. I love our food. Every time I have the chance, I go over to one of the local Puerto Rican restaurants here in Boston. And I think it's a great addition to your experience here in Boston. It's something new, so there's always people asking questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
They see it as something new. It is. We are different. We're just different. Our culture is, I think, completely not the opposite, but it's very different from American culture.
And it's hard to mix them. It's really hard to be a part of both.
I'm sorry, you just can't mix them.
You can't.
I'm sorry, you can't. I mean, just from even saying, when I'm home, I'll say hi to when I meet somebody, it's not like, oh, you don't wave them hello. There's
the kisses.
You can kiss them or hug them. It's normal. But if you do that here,
it's so much more. Oh, here it's like
weird.
Yeah.
And it's fine. That's a cultural difference. But
I suppose.
I think Latin culture is very, very, it's very rich and it's very personal. Puerto Rican culture is not the exception. It is just very extremely personal.
Yeah.
It's heavy on the.
I feel like we're all flirty. We're all sociable.
Yeah, you'll be called a flirt.
Absolutely. They don't know how to act
and you're just being
yourself.
Sometimes you're just being yourself and you're just trying to be nice, and then you'll have somebody you're flirting. I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't be nice here then. So that'll get mistaken.
It's
a lot
cultural.
Here.
I think
but it's just cultural.
Yeah.
So like I said, I think it's a good addition. It
spices things up.
And
you know what's funny that you brought up music? I need to listen to my Arabic music. Mm-hmm. It just brings me out of this world. Mm-hmm. It's it reminds me of the mountains and the dancing and the drinking, the food, the all that energy that yep. Just let loose, have fun, and you know what, country's absolutely screwed.
Mm-hmm.
There's a question of whether there's gonna be food on the table in the next month, and still these people are faithful, they're happy, mm-hmm. they're oppressed. Mm-hmm. That's real oppression.
Yeah, if there's a country where there's oppression,
that's real. Lebanon. There's no one. Yeah, there's mm-hmm. no one making it out, and it's it's really it's boiling down to whether or not do I leave my family and everything I know behind, or do I stay and this is my 80 something years and mm-hmm. that's gonna be them.
Mm-hmm.
So to live here and have a mix of that and I even find it funny how our cultures interact a lot too.
They do.
I feel I love to dance bachata. Mm-hmm. I love the music and
the beat of it is it's not similar, but it's very upbeat in both.
We
cultures.
Just dance. We just like to have dance,
exactly.
time to dance. The other day actually, so it was a bunch of girls in my suite, you know
Mm-hmm.
them. We had like 4 birthdays this month.
Oh, wow.
So we're like, we're gonna get together this night and just hang out, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
chill, talk, eat. And then we started dancing Depke. They wanted to learn how to belly dance and dance Depke. Depke is my
Okay.
line dance. So I started to teach them, and the girls loved it. So obviously we have the Colombian
Mm-hmm.
girls. Manny is Dominican, and then the next thing you know, I have like Amani at the door. He's like, "What's going on?" Amani's one of the guys from
Mm-hmm.
next door, and we just danced, and it was so much fun. It was like letting loose, like it was cultural. It was like wholesome,
And
and
it's like a rallying point. I mean,
it's beautiful.
things can be as bad as it can get, and if you have music, it's all good.
It
Like
is.
it'll be
It
tomorrow's
really
another
is.
day. For now,
Yeah.
we're just listening to music.
Oh. I feel like the lifestyle here is so rush, rush, rush. Like, what's next? Like, what do you got to get done? And
And to be honest, I don't think that's a bad thing.
yeah, you like it? I think everything in moderation is good.
Everything in moderation is good, but unfortunately, right, in the times we live right now, um, and this is perhaps a little too broad, but the U.S. is one of the top countries in the world, right?
Absolutely.
We're in a competition with our near peer adversaries, not only in military terms, but everything economic. Um, Economics. There's an economic war going on. There's a
Security,
technological
technology.
war,
Oh, yeah.
and everything's kind of blended. So that point where you bring up that things are very rushed here
Mm,
is because
we're in the game.
it's a machine that can never rest.
Yeah.
The U.S. everything that goes on in the United States has to be going 24/7.
Mm.
I always grew up hearing that. What is it? Is it New York? It's a city that never sleeps.
Never sleeps. Yeah.
The United States doesn't sleep
The whole,
at all.
the whole country.
Nobody sleeps here, and it's because
Yeah.
we're very hard. The United States is a very hardworking country, and it's for a reason. It's for a reason that we're number. Well, it's for a reason that we're number one in the world, right? Um, it's because of people that are willing to go that extra, not only the extra mile, people that are willing to give up their whole life
Yeah.
for X or Y company, X or Y firm, X or Y institution, organization,
The education is
government entity,
Mm-hmm,
even
mm-hmm.
teachers. It's because we have to. It's because there's just the need for it. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it's bad. It definitely doesn't allow for our culture to. It wouldn't. I mean, our culture wouldn't. It would detract from it.
If
To
you
be
don't make
honest.
time for being Puerto Rican, you will lose being Puerto Rican.
No,
Just like
definitely.
if I don't make time to listen to my music, to spend time with my Lebanese
Mhm.
friends, to go to festivals, to church, even in
Mhm.
my language, you will lose it.
Mhm.
And that's like a huge fear of mine. Like, I don't know about you, but like for your kids, like I want my kids to
I know that's a very.
to hold both like morality, to hold both like amounts of pride and
I wish I could raise my kids in Puerto Rico, but for many reasons, work being one of them.
I mean, we talked about this last time.
Yeah, we did.
Easy solution. Just, same thing. Raise them on a base. They're getting quality education and they're still on the beach.
I wish that were the case, but that's so hard to do when you're in the military.
Yeah,
when you're,
I know.
When you're active
Of
duty,
course.
especially the Marines. The Marines don't really have
Oh, I'm positive.
detachments or units in Puerto Rico. There's a very, very small detachment of Marines in Puerto Rico. I mean, I wouldn't. I was thinking about this the other day. How things are going. It wouldn't surprise me that one of the naval bases gets reopened. The biggest naval base in the Atlantic used to be in Puerto Rico.
Really, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's still the facilities are still there.
Right, but it's
but
just
the Navy's
vacant.
not there.
Yeah.
But it was huge. There's 78 municipalities in Puerto Rico, right? Basically, one of them, like more than half of it, was a military installation.
Wow.
It was massive.
Wow.
It was massive.
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
What do you feel like your biggest fear is when it comes to serving, to making
in the military?
Yeah, to making these big decisions for yourself.
I thought you were going to throw a harder one. My biggest fear, I don't want to, I mean, the cliche would be to say that somebody loses their life because of an action that I made. So the other day I was in a class where this there was this video playing
Mm-hmm.
of a Marine who was in Vietnam.
In which class?
History of war.
Okay.
This Marine, I almost, I mean, I didn't shed a tear, but
Oh
it
no.
impacted me immensely.
Wow.
So this Marine officer is saying how he needed a group of enlisted men to place their guns facing a certain direction because the enemy was retreating and he wanted to not let that happen. But he needed them to be in a certain position and they weren't there.
Mm.
And he told them to get there. And a Marine will always do what he's told. And because of his order, direct order, those Marines were blown to pieces.
Wow.
That's a decision he has to carry for the rest of his life.
As an officer.
The death of other Marines is something that is never taken lightly by any Marine. But I think that plays on to my overall fear, which is, I guess I could say, I always want to be humble enough to accept that a 20-year-old, I could be 45, that a 20-year-old is telling me you're wrong, sir.
Mm-hmm.
And I can be humble enough to say, holy shit, I am wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So my biggest fear is getting mixed into this. There's not a tradition. How do I say it?
Like you're caught up in
getting
your
caught up in a
stance.
situation where you lose the ability to draw a line and say, if I pass this point, I can't take this decision, and it ends up resulting in the life of other Marines. That is something that.
And it's so you didn't even say like me losing my life.
No.
You're not even concerned about your own life.
I'd rather lose my life than have another Marine lose a life because of myself.
Wow.
Because.
Wow.
That's just.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean,
it's a part of it all.
Why do you get to live because of a bad decision you made?
Mm.
And that's part of it. I mean, that is that's something huge that people from Afghanistan and from all wars have to deal with. And that's why you're an officer, right? That's why you're an officer. That's why you swore in. Our officer, the oath of office for officers is different from the oath of office for enlisted. There's a bad stigma for officers around the military because unfortunately there's too many officers out there that'll sit back in their office and be like, I'm the second lieutenant, I'm the captain, I'm the major. I just have to do the paperwork and the Marines can do the rest.
Mm-hmm.
Won't be fit or whatever, but if you read military books, military history, there's a lot of good officers out there who have laid their lives for their Marines, their airmen, or their soldiers.
The role of a leader.
The role of a leader is not different in war than what it is in your community. You put yourself out there and you got to make. That's one big point that I learned over the past year or so. A good officer, very much like any leader should, in the civilian world, if you may, is a person who makes the right decision, even if it comes at great personal risk.
Let me write that down.
So that means, are you going to be the one person to make the right decision, even if it means you might get fired? If you get fired, you're done for.
Yeah.
You get fired from the military, you lose your benefits.
Wow.
You lose everything.
Yeah.
For example, there was a case when COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really recall, I should, but I don't, of a case in an aircraft carrier. I believe it was an aircraft carrier. There was an outbreak on board COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the commanding officer everything in the military is set in stone. It's black and white. There's no gray zone in the military. You have to do what the book says.
Yeah.
There's just no ifs, and or buts. You do what the book says.
Of course.
And unfortunately, he wasn't getting. It's a weird situation. He wasn't getting a response, or he just felt the need that he had to. I think he had to. He leaked a conversation. He leaked something that the press found out about this big outbreak of COVID among sailors in an aircraft carrier. That was a big thing. The ship got called to port. He got fired.
Shoot.
He got removed of commanding duty.
Dang.
When he stepped off the boat, everybody cheered him. Everybody cheered for him because he had made the right decision, but it came at great personal risk for him. For the rest of those sailors' life, that'll probably be the best officer they served under, because they weren't in combat, but they knew that if in time of combat they would be serving under him, he would probably be manning the guns. He would probably be manning his own station, being a part of everything. So they felt safe putting their lives in his hands.
That's a big amount of pressure to put on yourself. Oh, well, it's a large amount of weight on your shoulders.
It is. I mean, many people.
I know it's nothing you're not prepared for, though. You know, like, it's something I'm sure you've thought about.
Yeah, I don't know if it sounds weird or anything, but I mean, my dad flew airplanes that are fairly old. Um, there was a very bad accident about 5 years ago, I want to say, where my dad had already retired, but his buddies crashed.
Yeah.
Plane went into, they crashed. The plane went into flames, and that's always a risk. I always knew that when my dad was flying, there could be a possibility of him not coming home. I have one friend who, at a very young age, we were still in elementary school, I think, or middle school. I don't remember. Her dad took off one night on a helicopter. Didn't make it back home. It's something. I think it might be underrated sometimes, or understated, but when you join the military, as much as people want to deny it nowadays, the military is a war fighting organization. Let that be clear, that the military is a war fighting organization. The speeches you'll hear from generals to when they go talk to cadets, midshipmen, or the service academies is about winning the next war, because we're a war fighting organization. Our job is a dangerous one. It doesn't matter where you are in the military. You're being exposed to some type of risk.
Absolutely.
And you signed up for it. For X or Y reason, you signed up for it. So.
And like the immense amount of pride that must come with that, to make such a big sacrifice, to make such a big risk in order to serve and to represent.
It is. I mean, for me, there's just a duty to carry on. Hopefully, I'm not a Marine, but hopefully within the next couple of years, I'll earn the title of Marines.
Absolutely.
It is that's also another way, earning your EGAs, your Eagle Globe and Anchor.
Mm-hmm.
You're carrying on the legacy of thousands of Marines who laid their life so that you could join this organization.
Wow. If you feel like, to wrap it up here, if you feel like you could talk to yourself in the future, or even in the past, what is one thing you would tell yourself? And you tell us, are we talking to yourself in the future or the past? And where do you want to be? Or where do you wish that you could have been? Let's focus on the future.
So yeah, I was gonna pick the future. So you want me to,
like, what would you tell yourself from now? What is some advice that you'd give yourself? What is a message? Something you want to leave the listeners with?
It might be a little cliche, but it gets very lost nowadays of remembering your purpose.
Amen.
So this is going to be very simple. You got to keep the main goal. All right, I started wrong. The main goal is to keep the main goal being the main goal. So essentially, let's take us for example. What would it come to BU for, right? To earn a bachelor's degree. In those 4 years, there's so many things that are going to change. There's so many things that are going to happen. There's so many people that you're going to meet. But your main goal, regardless of the fact, throughout the 4 years, is to keep your main goal that you started off freshman year of getting a bachelor's degree being the main goal throughout your 4 years.
Yeah.
You can fail class. You can have as many boyfriends or girlfriends as you want. You can do whatever you want. But you always have to keep in mind that the main goal is to keep the main goal being the main goal. And just stay humble throughout the process. And you'll be able to get there.
Don't get lost in it.
Don't get lost in it.
Wow. Yeah. I'm really happy that you could have, you know, opened up and talked to us a bit about like the other side of things too.
Yes.
And your perspective on your own duty. I think it's something that's extremely valuable.
I think there's a need for people to identify the duty that everybody has. It doesn't have to be serving. It's just duty to your brothers or duty to the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has some type of duty.
Wow. Yeah, and that purpose to keep the main goal the main goal.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please reach out if you guys want to hear anything specific. I will be posting Ian, so feel free to give him a follow and to check him out. But until next time, shukran and bye, ma salama. And I'll see you around, Ian.
We'll see each other around.
All right, bye.